Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, the show right here on Let's Talk Entertainment, where beginning way back in 2018, I began to undertake the project of attempting to locate, read, and review each of the roughly 600 short stories written by the late, great Ray Bradbury. Today we are up to our 282nd story, which is also the 23rd of 25 stories as we approach the end of his 2002 collection, One More for the Road. Today's story is, well, what do you have to say for yourself? If you're new to the show, the way this works is I do a brief synopsis of what happens in the story, and then I wrap it up with just a very light analysis. What I thought about it, was it a good story, did I like it, things like that. And I mainly do this for my own entertainment, but I've been happy to learn that on occasion, some of you have been reading along and enjoying these videos, so take it for what you will. I'm never going to change. They're always going to be the same. All right then, so a man is sleeping in a hotel room when he gets a phone call very early in the morning. A woman on the line says, well, what do you have to say for yourself? Soon enough, he is at her house and he proceeds to give a long monologue about the nature of men. He describes how cavemen back in the day were rude and crude and impetuous and always horsing around, and eventually marriage was invented, and it sort of reined them in just a little bit, but even the women they married couldn't fully change them, and men are these creatures who you have to take the way they are because they never grow up, but women on the other hand, many more dimensions, many more subtleties, and try as though they may, they can't really change men, but on occasions, sort of their paths cross in a way that it all sorts of works out as a couple. She kicks him out of the hotel room, but he goes her house, but he goes back to his hotel room, and soon enough there's a phone call, and it's her saying, "You can move back in, but I don't want to hear any crying from you. I hate it when a man cries, and when you get here, be sure to remember to lock the door." He says, "Consider it locked," and of course he goes back home. There's been a lot of comedies in this collection. I wasn't really expecting that. This one is a comedy. Bradbury is best known for science fiction. He actually does work science fiction into the story at one point where he says basically, years from now we might return to the moon and maybe push on out to Mars and eventually some planet around Alpha Centauri. But even there, or even exploring the moons of Saturn, we're not going to be that much different men, that is, than we are right now. I've never been married, but I've been in some relationships that have ended on the sort of differences they're sort of inferring go on between men and women in this story. But Bradbury is very intentionally playing on the tropes of men versus women. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that sort of shtick. Under lesser hands, this could have come across as being sexist or disingenuous. This is a comedy, mind you, but he was, of course, at the time of this story's writing, I think probably pretty close to the death of his wife. If it hadn't happened already at that point, I'm not entirely sure. It's very close. Who he loved dearly, and the death of his wife was one of the only occasions in his entire life where he basically stopped writing for like a month because he was just so heartbroken. So I don't at all think of Bradbury as somebody who disrespects women at all, but he also sort of knows very well his own stubbornness, and of course I can relate to that as well, although of course I came from a very different generation. I guess technically speaking, I'm a millennial. I was born in 1982, but that's like the first years of what's called a millennial, so I actually in many ways related more to Generation X. But I do remember, my upbringing, in school and culture, and a lot of it was about, being more equal and being more respectful and, not taking women for granted and all these things. And so it's interesting to see these differences. And of course now there's sort of this, among some circles, this sort of backlash where it's like trying to reassert the dominance of men and a whole lot of bullshit and, like unnecessary attacks on women culturally and socially, I'm talking about. and a whole lot of nonsense. But this story is very much, I would say, more written in a bit of a slightly more older-fashioned version of the world. I don't take it as being disrespectful towards women. I think it's more about the opinions of an author, or the understanding of an author living in a world where men and women sort of fit together well with their differences. And I think that's really what he's getting at, if he's getting at anything other than, of course, the hilarious comedic story itself. So this story shouldn't. I would say that it's not necessarily a story that will become as outdated as it might, because it's sort of it's obviously in good humor, but it also has kernels of truth. So it's very hard to talk about these things these days. I'm very much. I consider myself to be a person who believes in equal treatment and also the freedom to be what you want to be, and to be a man or a woman in the way that you want to be a man or woman. So I don't believe in anybody being locked into any sort of template. But I don't necessarily think that that's what Bradbury's saying. I'm thinking that he's talking about the tropes of sort of the typical. And of course, there was always going to be outliers. But then in our present day, I think there's more of what you would have traditionally called outliers than there are necessarily traditionalists. But I don't think either is necessarily wrong, but it can become wrong if the members of the couple are not in agreement. And I found it in my relationships to be a little bit confusing, because I've actually felt at times where I was making an effort to be a better man and to be open and to not expect traditional modes of conduct and thought and behavior from my significant others. I believe that we're in a time, or a time is coming, when we are more free to engage in these relationships in the way that we choose. But I actually found myself feeling like, and often too late into the ending of the relationship to really repair it, that perhaps some of the women I dated actually were far more traditional than I was. And so they were expecting me to be a bit more dominant, and to sort of make the decisions, as opposed to asking them, what do you want? Which is it was really weird to sort of encounter that issue in these relationships, because I don't feel drawn to that kind of behavior. I saw my parents' relationship, and I feel like my father thought that he had too much right to be in control at times, and it wasn't necessarily the best way for my mother, who eventually left him, thank God. So it's all a bit confusing. So I think that if anything, this story, for me at least, succeeds very well right now, because it calls to mind this push and pull, this give and take, this tug of war between the genders. So there you go. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? A classic line issued to many men by many women, feeling put out by the man's behavior, which in this story is said to be a behavior that can't fully be changed, and that might be true. I think we do have generally dominant traits for each gender, but within that, we are open. There's differences, but there's also have the ability to pick and to choose our behaviors. So, at the heart of it is free will. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? Next time, we'll be reading the next to the last story in this collection, Diane de Foray, which will also be our 283rd story. Can't believe we have come this far. Still a long way to go before we've successfully located and documented each and every Ray Bradbury short story, but that'll have to wait for the future. Thank you, and I will see you again soon.